right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the final.
Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth, and it's great to have everybody here on this Tuesday, December 19th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today, but before I get into that, I just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized, make sure to go to the following link. That is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. And as always, is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So, with that, let's get right into what we are going to talk about for today. So we're going to start off the show by talking about the Seattle Seahawks upsetting the Philadelphia Eagles last night 20-17. So we'll get into that in a second. Then, in the second part of the show, we're going to talk about Baker Mayfield's performance against the Packers over the weekend on Sunday. He's the first opposing quarterback to have a perfect passer rating in Lambeau Field. So we'll get into that. Then in the third part of the show, we'll go over the Saturday triple-header. We'll talk about what happened in those games, because I know I really didn't touch upon them at all yesterday, because obviously we went through individual games. And then in the final part of the show, we'll go through the current standings and where everything stands after Week 15. So that's what's on tap for today. So let's get right into the first topic, which is talking about last night's game between the Eagles and the Seahawks. So, the Eagles obviously losing their previous two games to the 49ers and the Cowboys, and the Seahawks, they were on a 4-game losing streak as well. So both teams, and I said this yesterday, really needed to win this game. There was no Geno Smith in this game. He actually was active, I believe, but, dealing with the groin injury, but he ultimately didn't play. It was Drew Lock who got the start, and there was also some questions on whether or not Jalen Hurts was going to play in this game too, because he wasn't feeling well. He had an illness that got worse, but he still gutted it out and played in this game, because if it wasn't going to be him, it was going to be Marcus Mariota that was going to get the start. So how the game started off, the Eagles, what a great drive to start the game. They went 15 plays, 75 yards, 8.5 minutes of time of possession. This is to open up the game. Down the field, and Jalen Hurts from 3 yards out scores a touchdown. Obviously, this wasn't a tush push. This was, he was dropping back to throw, and then he was able to, scramble and score from 3 yards out. So that put them up 7-0. Then both teams traded punts, and that was how the first quarter went. Then the Eagles went 16 plays, 63 yards. Again, almost 8.5 minutes of time of possession once again to kick a field goal. And that was a Jake Elliott field goal from 27 yards out. Then the Seahawks answered with a nice drive of their own to get a field goal, 12 plays, 67 yards. 4 minutes, 38 seconds of time of possession. Jason Myers from 26 yards out kicked the field goal. Both teams again punted. Then the Seahawks opened up the third quarter with a 9-play, 75-yard drive. 4 minutes, 55 seconds of time of possession. Kenneth Walker from 23 yards out. Great blocking on that play. Drew Lock was leading the way along with Colby Parkinson. It was a great run by Walker, who had a good game. So he scored a touchdown. So that tied the game. And I even said it as I was watching the game. I'm like, the Eagles are going to go right down the field and score a touchdown. And that's exactly what happened. 12 plays, 75 yards, 5 minutes, 22 seconds of time of possession. They went down the field. And the tush push, Jalen Hurts rushing touchdown. So that put them up 17-10. Both teams then traded punts. And then for the fourth quarter, The Seahawks, they went 11 plays, 45 yards, 6 minutes, 26 seconds of time of possession down the field. Jason Myers from 43 yards out kicked the field goal, so it was 17-13. Then the Eagles, their drive lasted 4 plays, 30 yards, as Jalen Hurts threw a pick to Julian Love. Now, there was some controversy on that because you can clearly see Julian Love grabbing the jersey of Quez Watkins, and the refs didn't call it. That probably should have been a flag, at least a holding. I don't know about pass interference, but that should have been at least a holding. But the refs let it go, the Seahawks didn't turn it into points or anything, so it didn't really matter. But that would have gave the Eagles a first down, and they probably maybe get points out of that. But yeah, the Seahawks punted, then the Eagles punted, and then the Seahawks, minute and 24 seconds of time of possession, go down the field. 10 plays, 92 yards. Drew Lock connected with DK Metcalf for 18 yards. Then he connected it with him for 34 yards, and he just threw it up. And there were 2 guys there on the Eagles right there. But DK was able to haul it in, and that set the Seahawks up. And then Drew Lock on 3rd down and 10 from the Eagles 29 connected with JaxonSmith-Njigba, the rookie, for a 29-yard touchdown. That put them up 20-17, and then Jalen Hurts threw a pick to Julian Love, which got reviewed. And I don't know why, on ESPN, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman weren't sure if he got both feet down. Well, Troy Aikman wasn't sure, but I was like, he clearly got in. Like looking at the replay, so I don't know, but yeah, he got in. They ruled it an interception, and the Seahawks, they pick up the win, 20-17. In an upset. And the Eagles now have lost 3 in a row, and they're still technically the 5th seed now in the NFC. Cowboys, are fortunate for them that they lost, obviously, on Sunday, so they keep the division lead. But Eagles right now have lost 3 in a row. You look at the stats for the game. Jalen Hurts went 17-31, 143 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He was their leading rusher. He had 82 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. DeAndre Swift had 18 carries for 74 yards. Kenneth Gainwell had 6 for 21. A.J. Brown was their leading receiver. He had 5 receptions for 56 yards. Devontae Smith had 50. Dallas Goedert had 30. DeAndre Swift, he had 2 receptions for 1 yard. It just it wasn't a good performance by the Eagles offense once again. They got 2 sacks in the game on defense. And then as for the Seahawks, Drew Lock went 22-33, 208 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Kenneth Walker had 86 yards rushing and a touchdown. DK Metcalf had 5 for 78. JaxonSmith-Njigba had 4 for 48 and a touchdown. Kenneth Walker had 3 for 26. Tyler Lockett 3 for 21. But yeah, the Seahawks, they get back to 7-7. That's a huge win for them because they were kind of reeling, and it looked like they were kind of fall out of this thing. But now they're 7-7. They're tied with the Vikings, the Rams, and the Saints, record wise. So next week's a big week for those teams. Actually, the Rams and the Saints play each other on Thursday, so that's a huge game. But that was an unexpected win by them. The fact that they were able to go 92 yards, in about a minute and a half, and ultimately win the game with Drew Lock. That was unbelievable. And he was, I liked what he said at the end of the game, because he was, and they talked about this on the post game on ESPN. Is he was kind of looked at as the guy to be the starter going forward when they traded him in the Russell Wilson deal, and Geno Smith kind of beat him out for the starting job, and he's kind of been the backup, and now he's seeing his first game action in quite some time. He started last week against the 49ers. And, he had to start again because, Geno still wasn't healthy enough to play. And, he did okay, and he actually did almost throw, a pick a couple times, especially on the last drive because that got hit up in the air and it looked like, someone was going to come down with it, but nobody was able to on the Eagles. Yeah, especially on that last drive. They threw to their playmakers. You're throwing it up to DK Metcalf, and he was able to haul in that big 34-yard pass. And then Jaxon Smith-Njigba, scored the touchdown. Kenneth Walker made some plays, obviously. The rushing touchdown. Yeah, and the Seahawks are missing some of their guys. The rookie Witherspoon was out. Obviously, Geno Smith being out. No Jamal Adams, but I think Seattle fans are happy about that. That trade really didn't work out for them. But the Seahawks are 7-7, so they're still in this thing. And then as for the Eagles, you could look at, Jalen Hurts, not being 100%, still getting over his illness. But the defense, on that last drive, they let the Seahawks go right down the field. And, they were missing some guys as well on the defensive side of the ball. Darius Slay obviously was not playing in this game. I did switch to the Seahawks taking the points. And I honestly, thought the Eagles were going to, win and cover because, once it was 17-13, minute and a half left, I was like, or so, I was like, yeah, Seattle's not going to go down the field. And they did. They did. You got to give them credit. That's a huge win for them. So, we'll see what happens going forward. As for the Eagles, the next time they play is on Christmas. They play the Giants, which, I know some people are probably like, the Giants could, maybe keep it close. The Eagles don't look good. I'm not buying into that. I'm not buying into that. Now, because of me saying that, that means you should, because whatever that. Well, I shouldn't say that because last night I took Seattle and they not only covered, they flat out won the game. So, got my typical 7-8 wins in the spread pool. Well, I got 8 this week, so that was good. But I think the Eagles, they got a soft finish to their schedule. They should sweep the Giants, and they also play the Cardinals in between that. Which, listen, Kyler Murray, James Conner, even though they're a really bad team, they could maybe put up some points, especially with how the defense for the Eagles has been playing. But there's no reason the Eagles shouldn't win their final 3 games and get the division. Because again, all they got to do is win out. You play the Giants twice, who you always beat, and you play the Cardinals, who aren't a good team this year. There's no and that's a home game. So there's back-to-back home games, and then you play the Giants in the Meadowlands. So there's no reason why the Eagles shouldn't win those last 3 games. And if they don't, well, then they really got some problems. But, you could just point at Hurts not feeling good, and, the defense. Obviously they gave, Matt Patricia the defensive play calling duties, so he's the new defensive coordinator. But in that last drive, it just didn't really matter. Drew Lock, he let him go 92 yards down the field, and Seattle picked up a big win. So, again, the Eagles, they're still in control of their own destiny. If they can just win out, they'll win the division. But it's not good. Not good what happened. What's going on with them? Now they've lost 3 in a row. They've lost 3 in a row now. And they're fortunate that they beat the Chiefs and the Bills. Because could you imagine if they lost those games? Because they very could have easily lost those games. They were down by 10, but they were able to come back. Because, you lose one of those 2 games, then it's just, it's even worse. So they're fortunate they won those games. But, they're fortunate that the hard part of that gauntlet of a schedule is over now. Now they got the softer part of their schedule to finish off the year. Anything less than 3-0 is a disappointment. Sorry, it just is. You're playing 2 last place teams right now. Well, not the Giants. The Commanders are in last place, but still, bottom of the league teams. So there's no reason why you shouldn't win those games. So we'll see what happens, but big win for Seattle, bad loss for the Eagles. So with that, we are going to take our first break of the show, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about Baker Mayfield and his performance against the Green Bay Packers on Sunday. As the Bucs now, they are in sole possession of the NFC South. So we'll talk about that as well when we come back from our first break. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And we're back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're now going to talk about Baker Mayfield and his performance on Sunday against the Green Bay Packers. So, kind of annoying for me because I picked the Packers, then I switched it to the Bucs, and then I switched back to the Packers. So I ended up losing the game. I mean, it looked good in the beginning because they were up. They went down the field and scored a touchdown on their first drive, but I mean, the Bucs just absolutely torched the Packers defense, and they got to figure out what they're going to do there because Joe Barry, they should probably get rid of him. That's another defensive coordinator that should be out of a job by the end of the year. But so we'll kind of go through the game summary. So the Bucs, they went down the field on their first drive, 10 plays, 54 yards. 5 minutes, 58 seconds of time of possession. So they kicked a field goal. Chase McLaughlin from 39 yards out. So actually the Packers turned it over on downs. The Bucs fumbled, and the Packers turned that into points. Forgot about that. So Jordan Love connected with Tucker Kraft, the rookie, for a 5-yard touchdown. Packers, see, the one thing I'll say is with the Packers is they have a lot of young receivers, tight ends, that they're going to continue to grow, and this is going to be a good offense. But the defense is definitely something. I mean, the offense is a work in progress, but the defense more so, with what's been going on with the defense lately. So the Packers went up 7-3. Then the Bucs went 7 plays, 75 yards. Baker Mayfield connected with Mike Evans on 3rd and 6 for a 19-yard touchdown. So Mike Evans, last week didn't do anything. I think he only had 1 catch, but gets back to his touchdown ways. Him and Baker Mayfield have had a nice connection this year. Hopefully that helps me, win my championship in fantasy this year. The Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans stack, which didn't really think that was going to be a good stack this year. It was just for the jokes, but it actually has been a good stack this year. So then in the second quarter, Packers, they kicked a field goal. Then the Bucs kicked a field goal later in the second quarter. So that made it 13-10 at the half. Then the Packers punted. Then the Bucs went 8 plays, 66 yards down the field, and Baker Mayfield connected with Rachaad White, who's really come on the last few weeks, for a 26-yard touchdown. So that put them up 20-10. Then the Packers answered with a touchdown of their own. Jordan Love connected with Jaden Reed, another young player that's been coming on the last couple of weeks. He scored a touchdown, so that made it 20-17. Then the Bucs, they scored another touchdown to make it 27-17. Baker connected with O'Keefe for 2 yards for a 2-yard touchdown. Packers kicked a field goal. Then this is, I don't know what the Packers defense was doing on this play, but Baker Mayfield connected with not Rachaad White, with David Moore for a 52-yard touchdown. The tackling on that play was just horrendous. He just, he ran free, scored a touchdown. That was, from 52 yards out. Then the Packers fumbled, and that basically ended the game, and the Bucs won. And the final stat line for Baker Mayfield on the day, 22-28, 381 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Rachaad White ran the ball for 89 yards. Chris Godwin had a great game. Didn't score a touchdown in this game, but he had 10 receptions for 155 yards. David Moore had 2 for 68 in a touchdown. Mike Evans had 4 for 57 in a touchdown. Rachaad White had 2 for 50 in a touchdown. K. Dodden had 2 for 44. O'Keefe only had that 1 reception. That was for 2 yards and a touchdown. That actually, wow. So that actually was his first catch of the season, because I'm just looking at his season stats. That's Oh, that came at a crucial time. Well, I shouldn't say crucial time, but that was big. And then as for the Packers, Jordan Love went 29 to 39, 284 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Aaron Jones made his return, 53 yards rushing on the ground. Dontavian Wicks was their leading receiver, another young receiver, 97 yards receiving. Tucker Kraft, 57 yards and a touchdown. Jaden Reed, 52 and a touchdown. Romeo Doubs had 30 receiving yards. But yeah, I mean, the Bucs pick up the win, and now they are in sole possession of the NFC South, our favorite division, and that's the team that I want to see win the division. And also the other thing too is, I mean, you look at Baker Mayfield's stats right now. So he's got 3,300 yards passing, 24 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and his QB rating is 94.7. He's having a good season. He's having a really good season. Now, people are talking about, is he get the long-term answer in Tampa Bay? I'm not so sure about that. But I mean, he's having a bounce back season. Because talking about bouncing, he bounced around a lot last year. I mean, he got traded to the Panthers, then the Panthers got rid of him. And then obviously the Rams picked him up. And he's played very well this year at points. And I'm hoping that he could be the starter moving forward, and they could also bring back Mike Evans because Mike Evans is they couldn't strike a long-term deal with him before the season. So I'm hoping that that changes and they could bring him back. I mean, listen, I don't know if Baker's the long-term answer, but yeah, I think he definitely does deserve at least like another year. And you continue to rebuild this team because they still have a lot of the core guys from the Super Bowl run. And Rachaad White, he's been making plays now, as their lead running back. He's definitely a threat in the receiving game as well, and that's, he scored a receiving touchdown in this game. But, listen, this NFC South is winnable, and right now they're tied with the Saints. I mean, the Falcons, they ended up losing to the Panthers, which was the game I also switched and won. So the Falcons right now are 6-8. The Bucs, they got the Jaguars at home. That could be without Trevor Lawrence, so they should win that game if Trevor Lawrence doesn't play. Then you're home against the Saints, who you already beat this year, which again is going to be a tough game. So we'll see what happens in that game. And then you play at the Panthers, which you should win, but again, it could be dicey because it's a divisional game. So I like where the Bucs are at right now. Now again, they could very easily lose these next 3 games. I think the game that I'm the most confident in, if he doesn't play, is the Jaguars game. If Trevor Lawrence doesn't play, they should be able to beat C.J. Beathard. But then, the divisional games are, it gets dicey. I mean, the Saints, that's the toughest game left on your schedule if Trevor Lawrence doesn't play. And then the Panthers, I mean, listen, they, only lost by 3 the last time they played the Bucs. It was more so a backdoor cover, but still, so I'm not going to sit here and be like, all right, the Bucs are definitely winning this division. I'm not going to say that because they could very easily drop, the next, 2, 3 or something, But the Saints, I mean, they got the Rams, they got the Bucs obviously, and then they got the Falcons, who they already lost to finish off the year. So it looks like right now it's going to come down to those 2 teams, as it should, because the Falcons, I mean, their quarterback issues. I mean, now it seems like Taylor Heineke could get the start this week once again because Desmond Ridder, again, did not play well against the Panthers. He threw a pick, as they were driving down the field in this game. I really did not pay attention to the Falcons-Panthers game, but all I know is I picked the Panthers, and they somehow got the win. 9-7 was the final score of that game. So they just kicked 3 field goals, and they won the game. And you know what's funny? Both of the Panthers' wins this year, I picked them. So, there were some other games I picked them, and they just, this is a team that can't score. But that's just funny that I took them, the home underdogs at home, with them, and I won both of those games. But yeah, I mean the NFC South is just what a division. I mean, I feel like we're most likely going to see a team at 8-9, make the playoffs from this division. But that's how it was last year too. I mean, the Bucs last year with Brady, I mean, they went 8-9. So it's we could very well see that once again. So we'll just have to. Again, we got 3 games left, but in Baker Mayfield, like I said in the beginning of the show, he is the first opposing quarterback to have a perfect passer rating. Baker Mayfield, out of all of the quarterbacks that you could think of that have played in Lambeau Field, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, all these guys, and Baker Mayfield is the first opposing quarterback to do so. So that's got to amount to something. And at times this year hasn't looked good. I mean, the first game they played against the Falcons, that game they should have won, but they lost that 16-13. It's they've had their rough moments this year. But there's games they should have won too. I mean, you could go back and look at the Texans game against C.J. Stroud. Listen, if that defense could make a stop, the Bucs right now would be 8-6. And they had a rough stretch. I mean, listen, ever since I made that video of, talking about the episode titled "Are the Bucs Legit?" the Bucs went on a losing streak, and it looked like they were going to go nowhere again. They lost to the Lions, the Falcons, lost to the Bills, the Texans, but now they're starting to play a little bit better. They played some divisional opponents. They won those 2 games. They beat the Packers in Lambeau. Packers got a bad defense. But again, the Packers were playing well, and all of a sudden they just, these last 2 games, I mean, what happened? You beat the Chiefs, and now you lose to, Tommy DeVito, and now you lose to the Bucs too. And the Bucs are not a bad team, but they're not, they're not a Super Bowl contender by any means. I kind of look at these 2 teams as being, kind of even, going in between them and the Packers. But Bucs proved they were the better team. But I like their schedule to finish the year, 2 home games, and then you play the Panthers. But again, it's something I like. Does not mean it's necessarily going to go the way I hope. Because I want to see them win the division. But I mean, even if they do win the division, again, I don't really expect them to do much in the playoffs. But listen, I would be so happy if the Buccaneers could knock out either the Phillies, the Eagles, or the Cowboys, because it's going to be one of those 2 teams that gets the top wild card. It would be nice to see that. I mean, they already played the Eagles this year, and they lost by a few scores. And the Cowboys, I mean, they played Tampa last year in the playoffs with Brady, and they destroyed them, and that was despite Brett Maher not being able to make a kick in the game. So, it's now you're going up against Baker Mayfield. So I mean, we'll see what happens, but I was very happy with Baker's performance, and hopefully he could build off of that, and lead the Bucs to a division title. That would be nice. Nice to see, and I see on social media, I'm not the only person that's happy for Baker's recent success. There's a lot of people that are. Because he kind of got the short end of the stick with the Browns especially. Because look at the Browns now. Now Joe Flacco's starting for them, and again, no disrespect to Joe Flacco, he's playing pretty well for them. He's helping them win games. Although again, like yesterday, I mean, I talked about yesterday, he threw 3 interceptions, but I mean, with what they decided to do and go out and get Deshaun Watson, that has not panned out. So. Maybe they should have kept Baker around, but listen, Baker's doing good where he's at. Hopefully this is his home moving forward. So just gonna enjoy it, take it game by game. So before I go into we go to our second break, once again I just want to remind you guys to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to the following link, that is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Once again, that is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So when we get back from our second break of the show, I actually wanted to recap the triple header games from Saturday, talk about those games, because there was a wild finish in one of them, and the other 2 we'll talk about. Those were blowouts, but we'll get into those games as well. So that is what we will talk about when we come back from our second break. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, I want to recap the Saturday games, talk about those, because there's some things to get into, not necessarily with the playoff picture with some of the teams, but also like what some of the teams' futures might be. Well, at least one of them. So we'll get into the first game, and that was the Bengals and the Vikings. So you had Nick Mullins going up against Jake Browning in this game. The Vikings, Josh Dobbs benched. Now it's the Nick Mullins show. And, at points in the game, looked good. Other points in the game, not so much. I mean, he threw an interception. He threw a couple of interceptions in this game, that were costly. And then there were other times where he was like, hey, that was a great throw. Like, he was about to get sacked, throws it to Jordan Addison, who takes it to the house. And that was a big play in the game. One of the surprises in the game was Ty Chandler. So there was no Alexander Mattison in this game. Ty Chandler had 23 carries for 132 yards and a touchdown. Addison had a good game, 6 receptions for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was the second one. Nick Mullins kind of just threw it up, and he was able to come down with it. So that was a great play there. Justin Jefferson had 7 for 84. T.J. Hockenson had 6 for 63. But yeah, the Bengals on their first drive, this was the first drive of the game. They went down the field 11 plays, 59 yards. They went up 3-0, almost 7 minutes of time of possession. The Vikings then answered with a nice drive of their own, 12 plays, 75 yards, 6 minutes, 18 seconds of time of possession. Ty Chandler scored a touchdown from 1 yard out, so that put them up 7-3. Both teams punted. Bengals punted. Then Nick Mullins threw his first pick. Bengals punted. Then he threw his second interception. And that was kind of the end of the half. There was actually, Jake Browning connected with T. Higgins for a 40-yard pass, and I was listening to that in the car, and I was like, oh, here we go. All right, the Bengals might get some points to, end the half. But then they ruled that incomplete, and then they just ended up running the ball with Chase Brown, and that ended the first half. So then, open up the third quarter. Nick Mullins and the Vikings, they went 8 plays, 92 yards on their first drive of the second half. Down the field, Nick Mullins connected with Jordan Addison for 37 yards out. And I shouldn't say 37 yards out, but yeah, 37 yards. That was the play where he looked like he was going to get sacked, and he got the ball off, and Addison was able to make the play, make the catch, and score the touchdown. So yeah, that put them up 14-3, and I'm sitting there going, yeah, the Bengals got no shot in this game, especially because then Browning threw a pick. Vikings turned that into a field goal. Then the Bengals went 8 plays, 75 yards down the field, and Jake Browning connected with T. Higgins for his first touchdown of the game, so that made it 17-10. Then the Vikings punted. Then the Bengals went 11 plays, 63 yards, 5.5 minutes of time of possession, and Joe Mixon scored on 4th and goal from 1 yard out, and that made it 17-17 all. Then the Vikings went down the field, 7 plays, 75 yards. Now, it looked like it was a pick six for the Bengals to put them up 7, and I was like, wow, the Bengals are going to end up covering maybe. But then there was a penalty on the play. Trey Hendrickson was offside, so then the Vikings, of course, go down the field. Ty Chandler, has a 30-yard run, and then Nick Mullins connects with Jordan Addison for that touchdown, which was a nice play. So that put them up by 7. Then the Bengals went 10 plays, 75 yards down the field, and Jake Browning connected with T. Higgins. And T. Higgins, I mean, he got tackled before the end zone, but he was able to reach his arm out and reached it over the goal line, and that ended up being a touchdown. So that made it 24-24. Vikings punted, and then the game ended up going to overtime. Bengals punted. Vikings turned it over on downs. And then the Bengals got into field goal range, and Evan McPherson from 29 yards out kicked a field goal, and that ended up being the game. And for the Bengals, they improved to 8-6, and the Vikings dropped to 7-7. And I think I saw that. Now I know he was cut by the Vikings, but I think he was cut by the Vikings I think it was like 2 or 3 times, which. That's crazy. And yeah, so he got cut by the Vikings in 2021. And there was a clip of him on the sideline saying they should have never cut me. Yeah, I mean, listen, Jake Browning, give him credit, and he ended up finishing with 324 yards passing, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Jamar Chase, he actually got hurt in this game, a shoulder injury, I believe. So who knows what his status is going to be moving forward. T. Higgins had 4 receptions for 61 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tyler Boyd had 2 for 53. He had that long pass that set up the field goal, which I thought he was going to score, but the Vikings ended up tackling him before that, so that ended up not being a touchdown. He ended up getting tackled. But the Bengals still ended up winning. They're 8-6. Vikings are 7-7. So we'll see what happens. The Vikings still have a playoff spot. The Bengals are in a good spot. Now they got the Steelers coming up, and the Steelers announced that Mason Rudolph's going to start. We'll get into that in a second. Then they got the Chiefs, and then they got the Browns at home. So they got some tough games left on their schedule, so we'll see what happens. As for the Vikings, they got the Lions twice and then the Packers in between that. So, I mean, again, Nick Mullins at times, looked good, but other times not so much. So, we'll see what happens. So we'll go to the second game, Colts and the Steelers. Steelers were up 13-0 in this game, and then the Colts just rattled off 30 points. And the Colts lost Zach Moss in this game. Also, Michael Pittman got hurt in this game as well. So you had guys like DJ Montgomery and as well as Tyler Goodson making plays for the Colts. The Colts ran the ball for 170 yards. You had Trey Sermon and Goodson. Trey Sermon had 88 yards rushing. Goodson had 69. Michael Pittman still was the leading receiver. He had 4 receptions for 78 yards. DJ Montgomery had 2 receptions for 48 yards and a touchdown. Mo Alley Cox had a touchdown. Zach Moss had a receiving touchdown in this game. Gardner Minshew had 3 touchdowns. He passed for over 200 yards, 215 yards. He had no interceptions. And as for the Steelers, I mean, Mitchell Trubisky just did not play well in this game. 16 of 23, 169 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. And he ended up getting benched for Mason Rudolph. Rudolph played like the final drive of the game, which didn't really do anything. Najee Harris had a rough game, 33 yards rushing. I mean, Jalen Warren only had 40, but they just couldn't run the football. Deontay Johnson was their leading receiver. He had 62 yards receiving and a touchdown. But yeah, it's just it was not a good day for the Steelers. I mean, they got up 13-0, and this is a team that's desperate for a win. They lost to 2, last place teams, in the Cardinals and the Patriots, both at home. You're up 13-0 against the Colts. You're like, hey, maybe the Steelers are going to pull this one out, and that was just not the case. And now the Colts are tied with the Jags along with the Texans for the division. You got a 3-way tie in the AFC South. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. Thought the Jags had that locked up. Guess not. Especially now if Trevor Lawrence doesn't play next week. So we'll see what happens there. But as for the Steelers, 7-7, and this could be actually 1 second. I gotta because I'm noticing my camera is been bugging out recently. So I'm just gonna just give me like 30 seconds, and I'll be right back. Actually, I copy and pasted the wrong thing I was going to do. But, well, let's just bear with me, folks, as I try to fix this here. So, I don't know why it's such an issue right now. But, and it's done this before. Where it like, you'll see, like, it glitching out, basically. But, yeah, I don't know why it just decided to do this. But let's see if that worked. All right, so hopefully we're good now. But yeah, that's what happens, and I think it's also a combination of the ring light too, because for some reason with the ring light, it can cause it to do what it was doing on the screen there. But yeah, so anyways, back to what we were talking about. So I apologize for that. But anyways, so yeah, the Steelers are now 7-7. It's been a rough stretch for them. I don't know what's going to happen, but there's people talking about Mike Tomlin getting fired, and honestly, you end up losing your final 3 games, which is very possible because you got the Bengals, then you got the Seahawks, then you got the Ravens. Seahawks and Ravens are back-to-back road games to finish the year, which is rough. Yeah, I honestly think the Steelers could lose every single game. I mean, I don't really see anything changing with Mason Rudolph. And listen, Kenny Pickett, is he the long-term answer? There's question marks there too, which I hate to say because I want to see him do well. But yeah, the Steelers got a lot of question marks there, and they're going to be without Minkah Fitzpatrick going forward because he had a knee injury in this game. So who knows what's going to happen there. But, yeah, not good for the Steelers at the moment. So, we'll see what happens. But, yeah, so they dropped to 7-7, and the Colts improved to 8-6. So then the final game, we'll run through that quickly. So the Lions and the Broncos. Lions all over the Broncos in this game, winning 42-17. Jared Goff, 278 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. They ran the ball for almost 200 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs had 100 yards and a touchdown. David Montgomery had 85 yards rushing on the ground. Yeah, it was a rough day for the Broncos. Sam Laporta, their tight end for the Lions, had 3 touchdowns. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 7 for 112 and a touchdown. Jahmyr Gibbs also had a receiving touchdown in this game. And then as for the Broncos, Russell Wilson went 18-32, 223 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Samaje Perine was their leading rusher with 37 yards. Jerry Jeudy was their leading receiver with 74 yards. Little Jordan Humphrey had a touchdown in this game. But yeah, Russell Wilson lost a fumble in this game. The Broncos were driving on their first drive of the game. To open it up, Russell Wilson connected with Jerry Jeudy for 40 yards, but then he ended up fumbling. And actually, it was only 7-0 after the first quarter, but then the Lions just kind of ran away with it. Broncos defense just had no answers. Sean Payton was yelling at Russell Wilson on the sidelines. It just it was not a good game for them. Yeah, so they dropped to 7-7. Now they play the Patriots on Christmas, which is a winnable game, but the Patriots got a good defense. But then they got the Chargers and then they're at the Raiders. So I mean, the Chargers game they should win. The Patriots game is at home. That game they should win. So that gets them right now to 9 wins. And then you're at the Raiders, which, the Raiders are not bad at home. So, and the Broncos, they're a team that, listen, they got to play with the lead. Because this is a team that can't get into shootouts. And especially with, their defense just couldn't stop anybody. But I thought, with how the Lions' defense has been playing lately, I thought, the Broncos, they, were going to be able to move the ball. And that just ended up not happening. So they dropped to 7-7. Lions back to their winning ways. Offense looked great. Jared Goff, the running game. If they can keep that going and hopefully the defense gets better, this team's going to be tough. But, it's kind of wait and see with them. But yeah, that's pretty much it with all the triple header games. Again, I apologize for the issues that I was dealing with my camera. Now it's working fine, but that's just what happens. Like you just gotta unplug it and plug it back in. So Yeah, we'll. It's just something that's gonna happen from time to time. But yeah, that's pretty much it when talking about this topic here. Let me know what you guys think about those games. So with that, we're going to take our final break of the show, and then when we come back, we will talk about the playoff picture, the current standings after Week 15. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we're going to now go through the playoff picture in both conferences. So we'll start off with the AFC. So right now, the Dolphins still hold 2-game lead over the Bills, so they're 10-4. Bills are at 8-6. But listen, the Dolphins still got tough games on their schedule. They got the Cowboys. I know the Cowboys got blown out by the Bills, but still, I mean, it's still a tough game where we're not going to just say the Cowboys are a terrible team now. I mean, obviously, the Cowboys are kind of who we thought they were at this current moment after that loss to the Bills, but still, very good team. Going to be tough, and the Dolphins are a team that can't beat a team with a winning record. So then they got the Ravens, and then they got the Bills to close out the year. And then as for the Bills, they got the Chargers with Easton Stick, which they should win. I don't know. I don't see a scenario in which they lose this game, but I don't know what I would do. I don't know what I'm saying, but they should win that game. I don't see a scenario. If it does happen, I don't know what I would say. That's basically it. Whatever. Then home against the Patriots, and then Dolphins to finish the year. So I'm hoping it comes down to that final game because that would be a great final game to have. Then you got the Ravens at 11-3. Looks like they're going to have the 1 seed. You got the Browns at 9-5. Bengals at 8-6. Steelers at 7-7. Credit the Bengals and the Browns with what they've been dealing with backup quarterbacks. Their Browns are in a much I shouldn't say a much better spot, but they are in a better spot than the Bengals at the moment. And I think they're a team that is going to get into the playoffs. They got the Jets. They got the Texans actually next week. Then they got the Jets. Then they got the Bengals. So some tough games there. But I think they get 10 wins at least, and that should be good enough to get you in. For the Bengals, you have the Steelers, the Chiefs, and the Browns. I mentioned that before. So it's going to be tough for the Bengals, but we'll see. Jake Browning's been playing good football. Then in the AFC South, this division is insane right now. You got 3 teams that are at 8-6. You got the Jags, the Colts, and the Texans. So right now, Jags. Trevor Lawrence is in concussion protocol, and if he misses this game against the Bucs, I don't think the Jags are going to win. But if he does play, then they should be. I give them a good chance to win this game. Then you got the Panthers and the Titans. So I mean, I think the Jags, if Trevor Lawrence does play, they win 2 of their next 3 at least. Then for the Colts, they are at the Falcons, home against the Raiders, home against the Texans. So, I mean, listen, the Colts could very easily lose 2 of their next 3. They could win 2 of their next 3. They could win all 3. They could lose all 3. The Falcons is going to be interesting because, is it going to be Heineke? Is it going to be Desmond Ridder? We'll see. the Colts, I think, at least get to 9 wins on the season. And then for the Texans, they got the Browns. We'll see if Stroud gets out of concussion protocol. You got the Browns, the Titans, and the Colts. So, yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens down the stretch with these teams. But yeah, and then you got the Chiefs. Leading the AFC West. They pretty much are gonna lock up this division. They play the Raiders at home, which they should win. Bengals at home, which could be tough because Browning's been playing better, but I think they should win that. And then they're at the Chargers with Easton Stick. So the Chiefs should probably win their next 3, and they got they'll at least have the division, and we'll see where they finish when it comes to the seedings in the AFC. Then you move over to the NFC side of things. So the Eagles and the Cowboys both tied at 10-4. Right now the Cowboys have the advantage because of conference record. But all the Eagles got to do is win their last 3 and they're in. So, and like I said, anything less than 3-0 against the Giants and the Cardinals is disappointing. Then in the NFC North, the Lions pretty much have the division wrapped up with the Vikings and the Packers both losing and then winning on Saturday. They're at 10-4. You got the Vikings twice, and then you got the Cowboys in between that. So, divisional games, and then you got the Cowboys in Jerry World. So those are tough games, but, ultimately, Lions are going to win this division and get at least the 3 seed. But who knows? You beat the Cowboys, and, maybe the Eagles slip up and lose another game, and you went out, and then all of a sudden you got the 2 seed. So, then in everybody's favorite division, the NFC South, you got the Bucs and the Saints tied at 7-7. You got the Falcons at 6-8. Panthers at 2-12. Yeah, right now it's going to come down to the Bucs and the Saints, and the week after this week they play each other in Tampa, so that's a big game. Then in the NFC West, the Niners pretty much have that division wrapped up at 11-3, but then you got the Rams in Seattle, fighting for wild card spots. Niners most likely will have the number 1 seed this year, which is huge. Because last year they had the 2 seed and they ended up having to go to Philly, and Brock Purdy got hurt. Now, whoever's, Niners being the 1 seed, everybody's gonna have to go there. So, then right now, then you look at the current seeding. So you got the Ravens at the 1, Dolphins 2, Chiefs 3, Jaguars 4. Then you got the Browns, the Bengals, and the Colts in the wild card spots. In the AFC, the Texans and the Bills are tied with the Bengals and the Colts. So this is a big week for all those teams. I feel like the Texans and the Bills are going to get in over the Colts and the Bengals. So we'll see. The Bills, I think, especially with their next 2 games, they should win those, and then it's going to come down to that last week against Miami. So. And they ran the football very well against the Cowboys. So if they can continue to do that, it's going to be a tough team. Tough team. No team is going to want to face this team because the Bills are most likely going to get in as, if they get in as a 6 or a 7 seed. I don't think the Chiefs or the Dolphins are going to want to see, especially the Chiefs, because the Bills in the Bills in the regular season have beaten the Chiefs. The Chiefs beat them in the playoffs. But, the last couple of times in the regular season, the Bills have had success against them in Arrowhead. So, I don't think the Chiefs are going to want to see them again. But that would be a great game. I'd take another Allen Mahomes matchup in the playoffs. So, and then over in the NFC, we got the Niners, the Colts. Why did I say the Colts? The Niners, the Cowboys, the Lions, and the Bucs. 1-4. Then you got the Eagles as the 5 right now. Vikings and Rams have the 6 and the 7. You got the Seahawks and the Saints at the 8 and 9 spots. And then you got the Falcons and the Packers, who are 6 and 8, a game back. The Packers, at 6 and 6, you thought, you got a soft schedule to finish off the year. Now, not so much. But they got to get some guys back. Get Christian Watson back on offense. I don't know. But the problem the last couple weeks has been the defense. I mean, they were leading against the Giants, and they let Tommy DeVito go right down the field and kick the game-winning field goal. You win that game, you're 7-7, and you're tied with all these teams. But that's not the case. So, I mean, I think the Rams are going to get in. I really was kind of low on them, especially with Stafford getting hurt earlier in the season. No Kyron Williams, but since he came back, Cooper Kupp's back. I mean, Stafford's getting better protection. I mean, the Rams have been very good. They've been very good. Ever since Kyron Williams has come back, I mean, 37 points they scored, 36, 31, 28 this past week. They look like a good team. And now Cooper Kupp's back to looking like his old self. So, yeah, they get in as a 7th seed. I mean, they're gonna be a dangerous team. Right now they would be playing the Cowboys in the first round, and that's a team that blew them out in Jerry World the last time they played them. This time could be different because this is a different Rams team than what they saw. You got a healthy Cooper Kupp, Kyron Williams. I mean, how great has Kyron Williams been? Since he's come back. So, yeah, I mean, I'd like to see the Rams get in. The Vikings, we'll see. I mean, because they got their quarterback issues, and I think it's just going to be a little bit too much to overcome. So, I don't know. I really don't know who's going to get these 2 spots because now you got Seattle picking up a win. I mean, they got the Titans, the Steelers, and the Cardinals, so that's a soft finish to their schedule. So, I mean, they could maybe win all 3 and get in. Because I see the Vikings definitely losing, maybe 2 of their last 3. I mean, but it's because of the quarterback situation. Then you also got the Saints as well. Well, they play the Rams, which is a big game for both teams. So, yeah, I mean, right now you kind of like maybe the Rams and the Seahawks to get in. But again, like, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Yeah. So that's basically the wild card. The wild card, the playoff picture, in both conferences. Obviously, got 3 weeks left, so there's still a lot that is left to be decided. On both sides. I mean, you got a bunch of 8-6 teams on one side, you got 7-7 on another. And yeah, it is going to be a wild finish to the season. I mean, you still don't know like what time, all these games are going to be played in the last week of the season, because it's depending on how everything shakes out. But it really is going to be a wild finish, and that's why it makes it exciting on one hand, where you have that last wild card spot, but then also it's like you get to the playoffs, and then you just see these teams like have no shot against the top seeds in the conferences. So then you're reminded of that. But I don't know. I mean, this year, again, it's wide open this year. I mean, right now, the 49ers look like the best team, by a decent margin. But we'll see what happens when they play the Ravens, because that's a good test for them, because the Ravens have a good defense. Lamar Jackson's playing well. So that, and again, that could be a Super Bowl preview, so we'll just have to wait and see with that. I'm really looking forward to that. That's a great way to end off, Christmas night, and then we go from there. But yeah, right now you got the Ravens and the 49ers as the top 2 teams. But I could definitely see, for me, I could see the Ravens getting upset more so than the Niners. But again, the Niners, they had that 3-game losing streak, so and again, somebody gets hurt, that could change things. We saw how they looked with Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams being out. Get them back. I mean, now they're back to being the 49ers. And Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey are playing. They're both MVP candidates right now. Brock Purdy did say that he thinks McCaffrey deserves it. I think McCaffrey right now, I mean, especially with Tyreek Hill missing this past week, I think McCaffrey should get it. Again, I think a lot of people are in lockstep with it, that this is like the first year in a while that it should be a non-QB that wins the MVP. So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the show for today. Once again, I thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow, of course, 11 a.m. Eastern time, so make sure to tune in for that. And until then, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Take care.